Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Story of Our Schools panel discussion, Our Schools, Our Communities, Moments in History. My name is Jen Harris, and I'm the Executive Director and founder of the Story of Our Schools. We're so excited to have you join our conversation tonight as our panelists discuss how our schools have been and continue to be community spaces that reflect larger cultural and historical changes. Before I turn it over to our panelists, I'd like to share a little bit about our organization and our school projects. The Story of Our Schools is a DC-based nonprofit that celebrates the role of DC schools within our city's rich history. Through after-school programs, we teach students how to research and uncover their school stories, and then design a permanent museum-quality exhibit that shares their findings with the broader community. Since 2015, we have partnered with 5 DC public schools: Capitol Hill Montessori at Logan, Marie Reed Elementary, Payne Elementary, Oyster Adams Bilingual School, and Elliott Hine Middle School. With the guidance of dedicated teachers and our standards-aligned curriculum, our students have the opportunity to participate throughout the entire research and exhibit design process. Our project-based learning program not only teaches primary research techniques, but it also reinforces analytic, writing, communication, and collaboration skills. Each of our exhibits spotlight different community stories that weave into the larger quilt of DC history. They not only share historical facts, but they also showcase the often unheard stories of past community leaders and the activism that shaped our city into what it is today. Our exhibits serve as a portal into the past, creating a welcoming space for all community members to have deeper conversations about their shared history. Even with the challenges of the pandemic, we were able to push our projects forward by creating an engaging virtual platform. With the guidance of our partner teachers and passionate community members, our projects continued through remote learning while we worked with school communities to bring their students' research to life. We also created a new website that lifts the exhibit content out of school buildings and into the virtual world, where it can be used as a learning tool and enjoyed by anyone. Through our evolving platform, our project allows participants to stay connected. Our final exhibits this year will not only reflect the work of our students, but also the pride and strength of their school communities. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mysiki Valentine. He is a DC native, strong education advocate, previous high school teacher, former executive director of Many Languages, One Voice, Story of Our School supporter, and our moderator for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen, for that wonderful introduction. And I am so excited to be here tonight with all of you and all of our wonderful panelists. Story of Our Schools is an important project for our city and our school communities. And I'm personally deeply invested in Story of Our Schools as a DC native, but also as someone who has gone through the DC public school system and seen our school communities change. Personally, for me, that's Shaw Junior High School, whose now legacy has been erased from its original location and moved. And so I'm really excited to be here to talk about why researching the importance of school history is important and strengthening that. But let's not delay. Let us take some time to get to know our panelists for the evening. Our first panelist for tonight will be Nancy Shia. Hi, Nancy. Nancy is a
Shia, Nancy.
photographer. Shia. Shia, I'm so sorry. Nancy Shia, thank you. Nancy is a longtime DC resident and a photographer who lives in Adams Morgan since 1975. Nancy has created a collections of photographs that document her neighborhood for the past 40 years, from the joyous Latin festival parades of the 1970s and 1980s to the ever-growing gentrification in Adams Morgan today. Nancy's photos speak to the social and economic changes of her community. They are archived in the Martin Luther King Jr. Library and can be seen in the Story of Our School exhibits, as well as the Smithsonian Anacostia Community Museum.
So
All right. So now we'll move to our next panelist, Mike Benson. Hey, Mike.
Hi.
Mike. Mike is a second grade teacher at Oyster Adams Bilingual School, and he has been with the school for over 10 years. He co leads a beloved after school club called the Explorers Club, where he and Ana Lopez take their students outside for adventures through Rock Creek Park and on overnight camping trips. Mike and Anna co lead the Story of Our Schools program at Oyster Adams between the years of 2019 and 2021. It's so good to see you, Mike.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Dave Garcia. Hey, Dave.
Hello.
Dave is a fifth grade student at Oyster Adams Bilingual School. He loves his friends and playing soccer. Dave participated in the Story of Our Schools program between the years of 2019 and 2020. Can't wait to hear from you later, Dave. And our last but not least panelist for tonight is Kelley Guèye. Kelley has been an educator for 18 years, and she has taught art at Elliott Hine Middle School for 7 years. Kelley uses art as a vessel to help her students express themselves as well as speak out about the racial and social injustices. Kelley was a co lead teacher for the Story of Our Schools program at Elliott Hines between the years of 2019 and 2020. Hi, Kelley.
Good evening.
So good. So good to hear from you. I just really want to take the time to thank all of our panelists for being here tonight. We are here to talk about moments in history and how our schools have been and continue to be community spaces that channel and reflect larger cultural and historical changes and must continuously adapt. So, without further delay, we're going to hop right into it. We're going to take about 10 minutes for each question, and we have about 4 questions tonight. And our lucky viewers will be able to hear from all of our panelists. So we'll start with question one. Our first question for the night is: how do we see our communities, and how do we respond to the change that we see in those communities? And I'm actually going to start with Nancy. Nancy, what compelled you to start taking photos in your community?
Well, I started photographing when I was 18. I was, I, what started me photographing was I went to a high school art show when I was in high school, and I saw a photograph, a Dorothea Lange photograph called "The Pea Picker's Wife." It's the iconic Dorothea Lange photo that became a postage stamp taken during the Great Depression, showing poverty. When I saw that picture in high school, I thought I could make pictures like that, but with a camera. It was an ink drawing that I saw, not the original photograph. And so I was thinking then that if you make pictures like that, you have the power to change poverty just by exposing it. So that's how I began photographing where I live. That's it.
Wow, powerful. Thank you so much, Nancy. Kelley, tell us about the school culture at Elliott Hines and what started you working there. And maybe you can tell us about some of the changes you've seen over the past 7 years.
Hi, I joined the Elliott Hine family in 2015, and in my 7 years, I've had four different principals during this time. So each principal added their own twist to the culture. Now our core values are ERIC, excellence, responsibility, integrity, and community, which I think has a positive influence on our community. Another thing is we had just got our IB authorization in 2015, and it wasn't really, you didn't see it throughout all the classes, but now you definitely do. IB is integrated across all the classes, so that's awesome. And the demographics have definitely changed. We're becoming a little bit more diverse here at Elliott High. And another thing, we wore uniforms when we first got here. It was cool to sixth graders, seventh graders, eighth graders all wore a different color. And it was kind of a rites of passage to move up to wearing a different color. But now we're uniform optional. So kids are coming comfortably as how they want to be. And some kids are still wearing uniforms. So it's been a lot of different changes, but I like to say for the good of the whole community, the kids.
Thank you so much, Kelly. It's good to hear about some of those positive changes. Changes. Mike, can you tell us a little bit about some of those changes in your school culture at Oyster Adams, and maybe if you've seen any changes, how those changes have impacted your students directly?
Yeah, thanks. In the last 12, I've been teaching there 12 years, and I haven't seen dramatic changes in the 12 years. It still has the core that it's always had. We're a bilingual school. I think, like the entire city, we're facing gentrification. And our school is in Woodley Park, which has always been, or for a long time, has been a fairly wealthy neighborhood. It also in boundary is Adams Morgan, which is more diverse, but it still is getting more expensive. I lived there for a while, and it's hard to pay rent in Adams Morgan. I think the biggest thing is we have a 50-50 model at our school where we expect 50% of the kids to be speaking Spanish at home and 50% to be speaking English. And that's kind of hard to maintain, especially every time they open a new condominium in Woodley Park. That means, a bunch more Anglophone families are in boundary. So we have to find ways to deal with that. So one thing we've done is our pre-K mostly is open for about 95% is for Spanish speaking families.
Thank you, Dave. It sounds like you guys are, I mean, thank you, Mike. It sounds like you guys are
That's
doing
okay.
amazing work there. But Dave, can you tell us a little bit about your neighborhood and your school? Are they the same or are they different?
My neighborhood and my school are kind of the same, but not really. Because my school, there's a lot of people. There's not like no bullying. They're all nice. The first day I got there, I said, "Wow, might be the only person who's gonna speak Spanish." And then I saw a lot of kids who speak Spanish, and some kids who didn't speak Spanish. They helped me with English, and I helped them with Spanish. In my neighborhood, there's like helpful people. They always help. They always be nice. But so right now for the pandemic, we don't really come out that much. And my school that is when I went to Adams, I thought there's all the big kids, and I thought because I was I'm gonna be one of the most younger kids there. They're gonna be kind of mean, but no, they're very helpful. They're very nice. They help the younger kids in the school, the kids who are starting.
Thank you so much, Dave. That was wonderful. We're going to move on to our second question of the night. And I really just want to say thank you to all our panelists for going through that first one so eloquently. Our second question tonight is schools and community had to switch gears very quickly when the pandemic started. This was difficult for everyone, producing new challenges and obstacles. Mike, Kelly, you guys, during your time at working for Story of Our Schools, did you learn about a time in history where your school community faced challenges and had to adapt quickly? And can you tell us about that moment and how it might relate to some of the challenges that we face today? And Kelly, if you would like to start us off, that would be wonderful.
All right. Well, in history, here, Elliott, okay, let me make sure I remember it right. Or Elliott Hine, two schools that came together. In 1952, 2 years before Brown versus Board of Education, uh, the Black kids came and integrated the school. And so that was 2 years before all that it was supposed to happen. And there was a majority white neighborhood. So they definitely experienced a lot. There's a quote on the wall of the exhibit that a kid was saying how much it was hard to come to the neighborhood to get to school, but they felt safe at school. And so that's kind of the same thing not the same thing that's going on now, but because of the pandemic and what was going on, that was a lot of challenges. But we got together very strong as a community online with our kids, and we had an advisory. I actually did meet up with a couple of my kids, COVID safe, but just to make sure we still had some kind of connection and sense of community within the building. So.
Powerful. Thank you so much, Kelley. And Mike, have you learned about some histories in time that, your school has had to adapt very quickly to a challenge?
Yeah, well, sort of the crux of our story is in the late 60s, early 70s, we had in Adams Morgan, particularly also Mount Pleasant, a big influx of Spanish speaking families, immigrant families. And to try to meet their needs, Oyster was one of the schools that tried innovative bilingual approaches. Our school very quickly decided to become a fully bilingual model, and there was really no model. There was no model to look to for that. So our school pretty much made it up, kind of innovated their way to it, and we're very successful pretty quickly. So I feel like when the pandemic happened, we had to deal with a very similar thing. All of a sudden we're making up everything we're doing. It's completely new. And I feel like maybe it's a little bit in the Oyster Adams DNA to do that. And I think we were pretty successful. I mean, it was not perfect by any means, but my kids showed up every day. They were all trying. So I was very proud of them.
Thank you. Yeah, and it is really good to hear about student perspective. Dave, can you tell us a little bit about how virtual learning changed your school experience? How did working on your school's history exhibit affect your understanding of the history around you?
It changed my school experience because it was my first time online and I didn't know how to use the computer a lot. So the first day it took me like just 30 minutes to log in to Teams and try to get in. And also that I'm not used to using the mask and being 6 feet, and I'm not used to see all the people with masks. I'm used to see them like not 6 feet. But right now, like when I started, like the first 10 months, I felt I got used to it.
Well, that's good to hear. Thank you so much. And Nancy, can you tell us about how the pandemic may have shifted the way that you connect with community now?
Well, clearly the pandemic drove me inside, and I wasn't able to go out and cover a lot of demonstrations and marches as I was used to doing. So I began to focus more on archiving all of my negative archives so I'd have a better handle on the history that is in my archive. I did do a lot of photographing from my front window. There were several Black Lives Matter demonstrations that marched by, but I tried to focus for a little while on people who were wearing masks and people who were not. And as an activist, while I was shooting out the front window, I kept a megaphone right close by so sometimes I could yell out the window when it seemed appropriate. That's me.
We need more people with microphones. I'm going to throw this next question out to any panelists, so feel free to unmute yourself and answer this. But were there any resources or strategies that you may have found helpful to you or to your community throughout the pandemic?
I found something
Okay, Dave.
like when I was kind of like angry and sad because I couldn't get out. I just took some deep breaths and just thought about things that made me happy.
Meditation.
Yes, yes, nice
Um,
breathing. Kelley?
Mindfulness, and along with Dave said, mindfulness and affirmations. Began starting all my classes online with the kids saying I am statements. They had to positively just get something in their head to affirm themselves and say I am, and then put whatever it is in the chat box. And I've continued that tradition, and here in every class, that's how we start. You have to say I am, and it's really powerful once everybody's quiet and it just goes the line. I'm this, I'm beautiful, I'm brave. And it's so cool to hear what they say, but it gets their energy right and feeling good and not worried about what else was going on. So, yeah.
Nancy, I saw you unmuted.
Uh, so the one thing I discovered was Zoom, and how much easier it is to go to a meeting at home. I totally appreciated that.
And just one more to anyone who wants to answer this question, but how did Story of Our Schools project help bring people together during the pandemic? In what ways did you see this project really bring people together during the pandemic? And feel free, unmute yourself whenever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the hard thing was being on teams all day, with just meeting after meeting after meeting, and but Story of Our Schools was something we were all committed to, and at the end of the long day to get back on another video call was tough. But then, Dave would be there every time, and his some of the a lot of the other groups would be there every time, and it was just so fun to like see their faces. Because the thing about the pandemic is you ended up getting a very narrow amount of people that you saw. You saw the same people over and over again, and it was really nice to have this group of kids that we had had a long year working together, and now we're continuing it, even though it was very difficult to do online. And thanks to Dave for being awesome at it.
Anyone else want to share how Story of Our Schools in ways have brought people together during the pandemic? Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to move on to our next question, which is very much closely aligned. And I'm curious about how do we record and learn from these moments in histories? And so, Nancy, what do you hope people will take away from when they view your 40-year collection of photographs?
Well, the last 40 years have been spent in Adams Morgan, so I'm hoping that they can see and get a sense of the community that Adams Morgan had in the 1970s and 80s before gentrification really took hold. And part of that community was we had a food co op called Fields of Plenty, and there were people from every walk of life that came through the food co-op before it folded, I think, in 1980. There were always marches going down Columbia Road from there was African Liberation Day would have one in May, the beginning of May, but there would be always worker marches and women's marches, and that would come down Columbia Road. They actually the Black Lives Matter march came down Columbia Road a few times, so it was like the good old days, but they don't really come down much anymore. Um, so I hope they take away just the sense that the joys and the struggles that we had as a very diverse, very culturally aware community uh, back then, that a lot of it seems to have disappeared.
Wow, thank you so much, Nancy. And speaking about cultural diversity and marches and protests, Mike, Kelly, I'm wondering with the racial awakening of 2020, the Capitol insurrection, in what ways did you all work to build awareness with your students and help lift them up during this time?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mike. First, can I shout out a student? I just saw you put my name in the chat box. That made me, hi, Ari, one of my favorites. But during that time, and still, I just hold space for kids to talk. They hear a lot of stuff. They're hearing stuff on the news, and during the pandemic, they just stayed in the house with parents and older people talking and not, not really knowing. I could tell, you can tell when someone's talking about something, like, do you really know? So we had conversation, and I gave voice to allow them to talk about things. And we talked about everything from Breonna Taylor to Black Lives Matter to Trump to white supremacy, all of it. And I use that. It corresponds nicely with my artivism unit. I taught them about the power of activism and creating art, and it's artivism. And some beautiful pieces of artwork was made digitally in my class. And one piece was actually picked to be in the DCPS school calendar. So hopefully you guys will see that soon. But just holding space and allowing them to know what you feel is okay. Let's talk about it and let's figure it out. Let's work it out together.
Great. Yeah, I mean, Oyster Adams is very diverse community. We have, culturally and socioeconomically, I've had kids from every continent, but we don't have a large Black population in our school, especially compared to the rest of the school. So I think this is a time was kind of a wake up call for us about how important, the students we have are, and I think our administration did a really great job of really focusing and saying we need to be an anti-racist school, and we need to. So we changed our curriculum. We got a lot of new books, and that's kind of the easy part. But the hard part is, we got to look at ourselves and how we do things. Try to find the blind spots we have, and grow like both personally and institutionally. And so as a white teacher, particularly, I want my Black students to feel loved and challenged and like really important in my class. But I also know that there are things that I can't fully see or totally understand all the time. So I think it's important for me to know that and work on that. I'm really lucky. I have a brand new teacher in second grade with me, Aaron Bland. He's on my teaching team, and he was one of our sources. He's also a Oyster alum, and he's brought a lot of great books to our school. And he's also my daughter's teacher, so I'm going to give a shout out to him.
That was so amazing. Thank you so much, Mike. Dave, if you could see the history books from the future, what would you hope that those history books say and share about kids during the pandemic?
I hope they like if example, like if I was writing a book and I was not like a kid of that when the pandemic, I would interview somebody who was and interview them and their experience and interview somebody, because some people just do what they saw. Like what I saw was that we have to be safe, and that the school wants to keep us safe, so we did online learning.
All right. Thank you so much. Yeah. We've seen a lot of different changes throughout the pandemic, and I just want to throw another question out to the panelists. But how do you address student and community questions about racial inequities or democracy? And feel free to, unmute yourself and answer when you feel free.
I think I have something to say. I mean, I'm going back to like the election of 2016. I'm very committed to, not putting my political views on the kids in my class. However, we're a school with a special mission, right? And we serve immigrant families, and so that was a difficult thing. And I think I hope that what I did was sort of like what Kelley was talking about, opening up spaces for kids to talk. Second graders often don't have very clear sense of big things like that, but they like to talk about the little things, that how it affects them. So hopefully opening up that space for them and their families to talk about it helped a bit to talk about democracy, what it means, what our country means, that kind of
Thank you, Mike, so much for creating those spaces for youth and parents. Anyone else? Nancy?
I think using photographs to show history is a really good way of educating children, because if you show a second grader a picture of a water fountain that says whites only, you give that second grader an opportunity to think about what that means, or fourth grader or whatever, but you're not exactly explaining it through your own political or racial perspective. You're giving that child an opportunity to learn by seeing the way things were, and then you could talk to the child about the way they are now. Or but I think by the use of photographs, in many ways, children can learn without even a lot of conversation.
Yes, amazing, Nancy. I agree with you. Anyone else? How are you, having those tough conversations with your students or with people in the community around racial inequalities, inequities, and democracy or democracy? And if not, I do have another question. So, okay. All right, well, let's try this one. Can anyone tell us about how Story of Our Schools program has really helped create maybe a neutral space to engage in conversations about critical moments in history? So, Mike, Kelley, you both have said that creating a space. How have we seen Story of Our Schools create neutral spaces for people to come together to have those challenging conversations about history?
Well, what I could say is the lovely, beautiful exhibit we have in our nice, beautiful new building. I've seen kids looking at the picture, going like, "Whoa, wow!" Like their reactions to it has been awesome. It's in our cafeteria, so I have not been able to come and say, "Hey, let's sit and talk about it," but I can see that they're looking and reading and learning from it and being like, "Oh wow, look how big this class was, and look at all those kids, and look at all these kids." So they're learning from the exhibit, which is awesome. I look forward to being able to hold a conversation in the future about it.
Yeah, what's interesting about the way we did it, we had students from, I guess it was from second grade, start of the first year, they were in second grade, going up to seventh grade. And then by the following year, we had third grade up to eighth grade. And I'd never really worked with, kids of that different, usually the Explorers Club was second and third grade. So it was really exciting to see, the connections that they made between the younger kids and the older kids, and the conversations they had. Um, yeah, that was really, really interesting for me as an educator.
Yeah, I'm sure youth have really interesting conversations when they're able to interact and engage with pieces that are, photographs, like Nancy said, and those that are displayed within the hallways of Kelly's building. So this is really exciting, and it's good to hear that Story of Our Schools is really promoting a space where we can dive into the history and really figure out how to chart a clear path forward. And so, speaking about a path forward, I want to move us to our next question, which is, what makes you hopeful for the future? Whether that's, pandemic or life or school, what gets you excited about the future? And I think we can start with Dave. Dave, would you like to start us off?
Yes.
Excellent.
I, I'm very hopeful. I wish that coronavirus is gone next year. 'Cause I heard like in Oyster that all the bigger kids went to like different places like Spain, and I want to go there, but if the coronavirus is there, I can't really go because I want to stay safe.
Okay. Hopeful for field trips in the future to
Uh,
Spain.
can I also um uh, can I also say something else?
Of course.
And I'm also hopeful that coronavirus is gone because I want to go see my friends again and go back to normal.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dave. Nancy, what are you hopeful for?
Well, I want to second what Dave said. We all hope the virus will be gone. Um, so I definitely hope that. But I have two answers. The first is just yesterday there was a program in the Lamont Park in Mount Pleasant. It was called a Chalk Fest, but it seemed more like a bubble and Chalk Fest because they had a bubble machine, and the program was sponsored by the Mount Pleasant Village, which is seniors, and in front of the bubble machine there were an amazing amount of toddlers, and the toddlers were just so delightful just to watch them. So they gave me hope for the future just by watching how free they were of any kind of prejudices or political perspectives or anything. So, and the second thing that makes me hopeful for the future is now everybody has a camera, and so it has worked to not eliminate injustice, but at least expose a lot more injustice and poverty. And hopefully, with the more exposure there is, the more the elimination of poverty there will be. But if it does or not, I don't know. But what I do know is that the struggle for justice and for the elimination of poverty is constant, and freedom isn't free. We all have to fight for it.
Yes, powerful. Thank you so much, Nancy. And I agree. We have cameras everywhere now. And so we all can now take a part in spotlighting the racial, economic injustices that we see and ensuring that other people do not hide from the truth. Kelley, can you tell us what you are hopeful for in the future?
Sorry, a notification popped up. Uh, I was vibing with both my fellow panelists' answers. Dave, definitely want to do. I took 4 kids to West Africa, Senegal. I love field trips. I like to do them big. So I really look forward to doing that again safely. And the bubbles and the chalk, that's the new thing in my courtyard space. We had bubbles and chalk the other day, and that was enjoyable. I was worried about the bubbles because of the mask, but it was only a few kids out there, and they were very far away with the bubbles, for the record. Uh, what makes me hopeful, though, are my students and their big creative ideas. It's just amazing. I do open studio where I just give them the materials and say, hey, what do you want to create? What do you want to do? Okay. So that's how the world is changed, by big, amazing ideas and trying and experimenting. And my students are thoughtful most of the time, careful, risk takers. And I think that's what makes me hopeful, because that's how things are going to change. Big ideas and good hearts.
Thank you so much, Kelley. And Mike, can you tell us what you're hopeful for?
Yeah, well, I'm hopeful. Makes me hopeful to be back in school. And I just hope we can stay because yeah, I don't miss online teaching really. And it's just nice to see all the kids there. I guess the other thing that I'm really makes me really hopeful is the school I work in. It's and the families I work with. To me, it's kind of like what to me it's what the American dream should be. It's we've got people from all over, from all different backgrounds, working together and building something that's bigger than the sum of the parts. And everyone's adding something unique. And Oyster Adams is that kind of place, and that's what I hope more of our country could be like and celebrate.
That's what's up.
Well, you all have just been wonderful for the evening. And I know this is going to be a little bit of a surprise, but I do have another question for you all. So feel free to answer it and take your time to, get your words together. But I just want to know, can anyone on the panel tonight tell us about a positive that they've seen occur because of the pandemic, due to the pandemic? Or that has allowed us to maybe move in a more positive light because of the pandemic?
Can I say something?
Yes.
One thing positive is that when I go outside, I see people with masks, and when they when they bump into somebody, they do like 6 feet. They didn't really go together. And when I came back to school, all the kids were like, each time when we go in the class, the, we have like 3 feet of desks, and when we go outside, we have like 6 feet. We don't really we play, but we don't want to be or next to each other, and we want to be safe.
That's good, Dave. It's good to hear that people are taking the safety regulations of COVID-19 in our neighborhoods and in our schools very, very safely. I'm happy to hear that. Anyone else? Any positives you've seen sprout since the pandemic or because of the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I want to add to what Dave was saying because I think he's absolutely right, and I think we've seen, especially in Washington, I think just people realizing like we're all in the same boat. You know, we all have to kind of come together on these things, or sink together or swim together. So I
Mhm.
think that's been positive, and then I think kids and maybe parents too just realize how important schools are
Yeah.
and how much they actually like going to school
Mhm.
and how much they missed it.
Mm.
So I think that's been positive.
Oh, I just realized I was unmuted though. Yes, I agree with Mike and Dave, and I think for me personally, I've become more mindful as a teacher. Um, that experience, being in this present moment, being in this studio space with the kids, and really being present. I caught myself the other day. The kids were being a little, and I want to. Usually, it's like, okay, let me get through this lesson. I know I only have 20 more minutes, and I was like, no, we're here in this present moment. And I was like, I made eye contact with, I'm so glad that we're here. And they're all like, oh, wait, yeah, we are here. Let's focus. So that's how I've grown. And it was a benefit for me as a teacher. I'm much more present in saying, hey, I'm grateful that we're here because you may get a notification that we got to go home.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that.
Nancy? Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I want to say that I think that because we had to slow down, people started looking out for each other more. And I know
Mhm.
for me, I have a lot of old friends that I hadn't spoken to in a long time. So I made those phone calls and they really made a difference in the people's lives who I spoke to. And I also think that Mother Earth was very thankful for the time of the shutdown when people didn't drive, when there were not car exhaust, and things just slowed down. That it felt like they had to before the pandemic, but with the pandemic, we were just allowed to be more grateful for little things.
Yes. Yes. Thank you all so much for those wonderful responses. I think we are at a critical moment where we all are in this together. We all must come together, be present in the moment, obey those really safe regulations, and take a moment to slow down and appreciate the planet that we're on, the communities that we're helping to build and grow, and make sure that we can preserve them. So once again, I just want to thank you all for being wonderful, wonderful panelists tonight and for joining me. I am going to pass the mic over to Jen, who's going to close us out and give us a little bit more information about our auction. So thank you again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mysiki, and thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your perspectives. It was such a wonderful conversation, and I am truly happy that you all could be with us tonight. Thank you. If you'd like to show your support of the story of our schools, please visit the website on your screen and join us for our 5th annual auction. All the proceeds benefit the work that brings to life the story of our schools. Lastly, very quickly, I'd like to thank our 2021 Leadership Circle donors. Their annual contributions make our work possible all year long. Alex and Miriam Knock, Donica Petrosius and Greg Witzel, Penn Hill Group, Kathy Albright, Aaron and Brian Roth, Georgetown Public Affairs, Davis and Harmon LLP, Renee and Vic Klatt, Elizabeth and Pete Nash, Suzanne O'Shea, Chris and Virginia White, and Alice Tobin. Again, thank you all so much for joining us this evening, and I hope to see you at our next event as we toast to the success of our partner schools while celebrating our past and moving towards a more hopeful future. Thank you.